Hey, everyone here at the House Now 3D podcast. We have a really cool guest with us. He comes to us from, actually, he's living in Norway now, or at least residing in Norway. Adrian, he is an architect. He has a lot of expertise in the area. And specifically, as we know in this podcast, we talk about things related to innovative house building techniques and specifically around 3D concrete printing. So Adrian, welcome to the show. And thank you for joining us in this fine day.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Beautiful here, man. So talk to us. Obviously, it's taking the world, for the people that are paying attention, by storm. It's huge in Europe, the Middle East. You know, we know the Emirates is leading in a lot of 3D concrete work and just putting money there. It's there's a lot of smaller players in the US, of course, so it's a worldwide phenomenon. There's a motivation there to, for a lot of different reasons, to do this new style and technique of house building. But so we'll get to that in a little bit here, but share with the folks, if you would, what your background is and what you do now.
Yeah, so I have studied at the Royal Danish Academy of Architecture in Copenhagen, and I've focused on 3D printing since I saw that it could sort of transform, let's say, complex ideas and hand drawings into 3D shapes. That's sort of where it ticked off. I thought, like, yes, we've seen a lot of square houses. Could we perhaps challenge the way it looks and then perhaps the way it's experienced by the occupant? And yeah, so that's sort of where it started, to challenge how it looks many years ago. And then as time went along and the projects I started working more and more, I realized that it's not only the looks. You can also work with, materials and integrating functions and sort of making the building efficient as well, which is sort of so if you often if you go into that direction, the design also adapts according to the function. So you can have some functional and let's say aesthetically stimulating buildings as a result. And this is sort of driven me, this desire to make unique spaces for people and gradually make it more affordable as people invest in the technology. So
yes.
Aiming for the roadster, and then
was there anything in your background, Adrian, that you felt perhaps led you to this path, or was it just kind of serendipitous? Like when you were, I don't know, a kid, a teenager, perhaps did you like design? Did you like how did you see things differently?
Well, I've had my sort of introverted zone where I drew, like drawing a lot, and
yes,
playing guitar and piano and playing in the band, and sort of coming from I don't know, like a space that I always wanted to discover and develop. So that sort of led me. Actually, I sort of made a choice at one point where it was either music or drawing.
Yes.
So sort of the things I did let's say for free intuitively as a child. So and then I went with drawing towards architecture, which is sort of perhaps a compromise. It's a bit stiff, as I sort of mentioned. And then
so often we all know musicians typically stay poor and starving. So there's life constrains us in some of our choices here. So yes.
Yeah. So some let's say reasonable thinking were also a part of that that decision, let's say. Yeah.
Yes. Awesome, man. So let's so then you, like, what was that initial, you touched on a lot of things kind of in your introduction there. One second, so yeah, you had kind of a long thread there, Adrian, about how you kind of grew into the space and whatnot. And you mentioned one point that was of quite of interest to me, and that is, what was that first spark when you saw it? And give us like a timeline. So it was like 2010, 2015, like when you first saw it, and then what was that kind of that initial thing, like, this is really something that I want to do or pursue? Can you give us that, break that down a little bit for us?
Yeah, it was my first semester in school on my bachelor's, and I was, as I mentioned, like drawing these more organic shapes, sort of attracting towards this, and then one day I heard this. It sounded like an Irish bagpipe. It was like and it's like this repeating noise, and I heard it in walking past like a corner room in the corner of my school, and I go inside and I see this. I just follow the noise and I see this machine. The 3D printer, the little 3D printer making some model,
Yes.
and I just saw how the machine did all printing a complex geometry, and I just sort of saw my hand drawings in there, and that's when I since then just been designing for 3D printing initially for polymers, plastics, towards like 45-degree overhangs and sort of changing the way we build without supports. That was sort of way back then, and there was always, let's say, not issues, not problems, but possibilities and things to discover. Designing for this technology, for the printer, and then for the material also. So I just knew from then that this is interesting, working with this. This can, and then learning more about, of course, the potential positive effects it has on the environment, saving material, optimizing geometries to use less material.
Did you have some mentors or some, I guess, some people you looked up to that were inspiring you in the space, Adrian, or was maybe it was just so new that there wasn't a lot of, I guess, innovation or people leading in the space? Did you have some mentors that were really perhaps and maybe still are doing some cutting edge things and leading in the space?
More recently, I've had especially one great mentor, but back then, so this was on my master's when I finally found the place to get taken seriously with this, kind of, because in my bachelor's, I went to a very analog. It had an analog, I want to say mindset, but which is not to be, it's a very important part of creating these buildings and other elements. But in the beginning, I was like, I was sitting alone in the computer room and learning, the software necessary, and it was not. I did it on the side, or as my main thing on the side. So it wasn't, but it depends on which institute you go to, and I mean, perhaps the school I went to has some traditions that and a way of teaching that didn't match the 3D printing direction I was interested in. For in the first 3 years. But I was continuously finding people to discuss with, and there were some students that was really, also onto the same thing. Founders of Saga Architects, Sebastian and Karl Johan. They were also, they were considering, printing on Mars and, using, some really fascinating ideas. Using CNC to dig out the regolith, the earth, and then you have these caves that was first CNC milled out, and then using that material to then change the nozzle of the printer and then print with it and start to manipulate the space inside.
Oh, I see where you go with that. That's fascinating. Yeah, that whole mindset there. Obviously the challenge is material science and actually, executing that, but the concept is like, what if this could be done? That's extremely innovative.
Yeah, exactly. So
then you found like you said, you had, the school was perhaps more traditional. And then, of course, then you found, so then but then always on the edge of everything, there's always some, especially with social media and network and internet, you can always find some maybe people doing what you're doing. And of course, and then having a peer group as well in college or close to it is profoundly important, as we both know, to foster ideas. And we look at some of these, the largest companies in the world, Zuckerberg or whatever. And there's kind of the rebels, the people doing stuff on the edge that not really conforming to whatever is taught, because by definition, innovation is on the, on the edge of the next idea, right? It's the next adjacent space of what's being done. So clearly, if something's being taught, it's, it's codified, it's rigorous, it's stultified a bit, if you would. So some of these new ideas that people like yourselves push are really, they're not necessarily being led by academia.
Yeah, and definitely. But this was met very well at CETA Studio, great studio at the Royal Academy of Architecture in Copenhagen. So there I found a platform where people was like on the same thing, mostly international students. not from Denmark. And yeah, I met there my mentor Paul Nicholas, which
Nicholas,
which is
okay. What's he doing now, by
yeah.
the way?
He's like head of institute research at CETA. So, and he has a like wide knowledge of material. They focus on materials and tools, creating tools to rather than designs and plans, like conventional architecture where you make plans. This was basically not allowed in the studio. You don't make plans.
I love that. I love that.
We were barely allowed to make a section, which showed some natural ventilation and integrated functions and everything, but it's mostly tools and materials and methods, strategies.
Yes.
So I was, I was a bit challenged by that as well, since I also, I want to create these spaces. That was sort of the initial.
Is the idea, the challenging part of that approach, Adrian, is it because they literally try to remove all structure? Is that, I mean, like physically and I guess literally, or I guess academically or from a learning perspective and actually for building perspective, they try to like knock down structure and process, and they just try to have you just innovate from really without boundaries or out constraints. Is that a fair assessment of that, or elaborate on that? Why was it such a nurturing environment and maybe spurred growth as well?
Yeah, I think it's actually sort of the opposite, because
okay.
because they are it's research based. So you need to have these, you need to sort of have a baseline, you need to have perhaps a hypothesis, and then you do tests, and you have to do repeatedly to test your hypothesis to find answers. So it's a lot about developing methods that can then be applied to multiple designs. So in a way, it's in a way, it's actually about cutting away everything in CETA and sort of finding that tool, that method, or that material that works. And of course, there are ways around. I focused on creating these prototypes and really pushing through with that, so that they are, of course,
that was from was that from a design perspective, prototypes, or elaborate? Tell me about that.
So I was working at the architecture firm and connected quite well with the partner there, and was invited to this competition once I started on CETA. And then he sort of CC'd the heads of the institutes, and like, dear Adrian, this is something for you. And then because he actually established that line, that whole the technology line in school. So he sent that, and then I got on board with Paul, and I think that's sort of I was lucky to sort of get Paul on the team as well, or to work with Paul. And then, so it was this competition, this housing hack for large-scale 3D printing of concrete for the housing industry, a hackathon, international competition with, I think, 12 countries participated, and it was like China and Switzerland and Australia and a lot of schools. Then it was easy to sort of just jump into a design and to start. I had modeled these for printing, and then I sort of, let's just make something awesome and let's just print it and show that it works.
Yes.
But then he was good at pulling and like letting me rethinking how I was evaluating my process. So then it was more about, let's focus on the wall element and look at the wall. Let's not do the entire house at once.
Yeah.
So then going into the wall, and then we had a common workshop using mycelium, like the network of mushrooms, and then perhaps could we have a complex printed skin that interlocks with a structural organic insulation material, which was then mycelium. So we started working with the goal was to, and this is much easier if I could show like pictures, but this is a podcast, so maybe not the best place to show pictures. But well, the process, just to explain a bit of the thinking of how it was working. So then it was about having a printed skin that interlocks with an organic structural insulation material. And then you sort of utilize the complex geometry of the printer. And then you utilize that the mycelium comes in granulate, so you can pour it into complex shapes. Like you can put a square insulation material that's wool, rock wool. So you put the granulate inside a complex structure that binds, and so I grew it for 4 days or so, and then you kill it at 50 degrees, and it dries and hardens
So
into place.
so let me get this straight, Adrian. So you were literally growing a natural insulation inside the wall. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
Amazing. That's incredible. Yeah, that's amazing. So I can see why your mentor was like, hey, like yes, designs, all the whole thing is, but then like, he zeroed you in, said, how about how about working on something incredibly innovative, but also very practical? I mean, there's a lot of different ways of process and design thinking, of course, but that's incredible. But yeah, something like you said, you literally grew insulation inside the wall of some site, and then you killed it, and then then because it was complicated, and yeah, so that's incredible. That's incredible. But go ahead, you're on a train of thought there. I just wanted to just crystallize that piece.
Yeah, cheers. I mean, yeah, so that was one of the things, and that sparks a lot of new ideas, right? Thinking in different ways, and so also that complex shape that interlocked with the structural mycelium insulation, that also could then integrate load-bearing columns where you cast out reinforced columns, and you can integrate sort of water, ventilation, electricity. Of course, if it's printed and integrated in concrete, it's actually quite rigid. So, and how do you maintain, etc. There's many aspects, but it was sort of pointing to different ways of building and constructing. And,
different ways of thinking and approaching, right? Yeah, I mean, like, yes, the end result is like this thing you see, but like how much, I mean, you use, we as an engineer, I've been through some other, like some organic type of, like, hey, use the butterfly, use nanotechnology. How can we, what a biomimicry or something like that. Yeah, how can you recreate that in our world? So I love that approach and that philosophy. Really, I think it's a design philosophy that's incredible. So that's an incredible example, an amazing example of how you could use it in really innovative fashion inside 3D concrete printing. So let's pivot towards so was there a gap between that? I'm sure obviously there's a gap between that period and then what you're doing now, that kind of intermediate step, or did it just kind of like what you're doing now is just from that point you start doing really innovative design thinking and approaches and things like that? Could you elaborate on that, the time between then and now, I suppose?
Yeah. So after that, the goal was actually to win the competition in order to be able to print it.
Oh yeah, I should let you finish the competition story. You like jumped ahead.
Oh no, I mean nothing. I'm just rambling.
Did you guys win? Did you win?
Yeah, first prize.
You're like, yeah. Like,
so
oh, that's amazing, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was really awesome, and we were supposed to then print it after we won, but so I was speaking with DTU, the Technical University in Denmark, and was able to use the cobalt machine, the BOD 2.
Yes.
Around 10 times 10 meters, and then sitting in the weekends learning how to use the machine, using the cobalt slicer based on the digital files, and then and then printing printing in 7 hours, printing the entire structure, and suddenly it was like 3 tons of I would also consider it a sculpture sort of, but also with all these ideas packed inside it. So that was really mind blowing, and then winning that competition led to Henrik, CEO so I was hired at Cobalt, and worked there on some designs for clients. I was also doing this quite intensive masters, but
yes,
so working there and was part of together with Alma and of course a team printing a house on site for 3DCP, which is a Danish startup that has now bought a printer. So it's Mikkel and Hassan who who rules that company, and which I also know, especially after living in the basement there for 3 weeks, working 16 hours a day on site, printing this house. So that's another sort of project that I was heavily involved in, making the digital file, and coordinating with all the parts involved, and testing a new
Did you
material.
incorporate, so obviously the design was, I'm sure the design was fantastic, like the physical, like, the way it looked, like from an traditional architectural perspective. Did you incorporate any innovative, I guess, approaches inside the walls on that building that you did for 3DCP?
Yeah, I want to be clear that it was Saga Architects who designed
Okay, my bad.
the building.
Yes.
But of course there is a difference between what do you say, a rough 3D model and a model that has interface to windows, to doors, has the right dimensions, considering the insulation, the wall thickness, there's many things to adjust when you go from a 3D model that can be rendered and visualized into a printable file where you need that millimeter precision to make a structure that's, for example, can have interfaces to windows. And suddenly there was a cold bridge in the wall, so we had to put in a flamingo block. So we had to just remove that mesh or that surface entirely, so the printer wouldn't move there. And then later on, we would know which layer that was on and insert a flamingo block. I mean, there's many tweakings and things that goes along the way.
Yes.
And we even switched, from 20 millimeter layer height, and it was estimated to be around 30 hours print time in total for the raw house. And then, switching to 40 millimeter layer height, and suddenly, and that worked. It sort of worked. So
yeah. Did you cut your build time in half, or like by a third?
Exactly. Yeah, right. In theory. So these findings are still being done, on site. So there's just like by impulse or by like so there's a lot to figure out still. But so that was sort of another project since
what give us a timeline, Adrian, if you would. What year was that? Just like, obviously things evolve and things progress and people learn. Just give us a quick snapshot there at the time.
That's wow. When was that? That was 2021. Yeah.
Okay. 21. Yeah.
21. Summer of 2021.
No, it's whatever. Just approximate. Yeah. So that's close enough. So okay. So that's just like, again, just as we just know things are moving so quickly. And then which teams, another key piece is, you know this more than I do, is how many builds these teams have done, whoever the team is, wherever they are in the world, how many actual executed projects have you done? And there's so much to learn. And you go from the theory and the CAD model to the actual, printer on site, and you're building a home or a structure. That's a vast chasm between those two situations.
Yeah, definitely.
So continuing here. So you that was another project you did. So now what bring us into today? What are some of the innovative things you're doing? I guess first kind of define what you do, is like your job title or whatever, and then are you kind of running your own shop? And then what does your kind of day-to-day look like? What is that? What's the cool things you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, so those are like, I can also very quickly say, since then I was hired as a consultant at Saga to design 3D printed houses for 3DCP. So then I actually designed the house. So at this project, I was sort of refining and then printing on site.
Yes.
And then next step, I was designing and talking with the client and like that, as a, let's say, conventional architect for 3D printing. And then I've also worked with Voom, which is a very interesting company run by Morten, who they focus on tiny houses printed in, let's say, recycled polymers, plastics, and wood fiber. And during my thesis, I focused on polymers and wood fibers for roof structures. So you have concrete in the walls for compression, and then you have like then you have polymers and wood fibers in the roof, for example. So this was also something that had worked with. So we connected and sort of yeah, I made some visualizations and some design suggestions, and we are currently I'm consulting there.
Yeah.
So very exciting to see where that might lead. But I have this Additive, which is my company. So yeah, Additive from additive manufacturing, obviously.
I was like trying to wrap my brain, like where did he get this name?
Yeah, in the middle of the night, we just can't know. So
Bolt of inspiration.
yeah, yeah. So that's just to have a name for now. You know, it's in the place to receive money for work. And at the moment, I'm in Oslo I have some conversations with investors and startup accelerators and a lot of people here, and I receive a lot of great response, while also communicating with large companies in the US that has some potentially some very large projects
Yeah.
with hundreds of houses.
Yes.
And promising budgets.
Does that tell me this, Adrian? Does that, obviously, like the US is big, there's lots of money and lots of people, you know, this and that. Does that excite you more to be part of a larger project, or kind of like maybe do these more niche projects remaining in Europe? Not that a large project couldn't happen in Europe, but it's just less likely. There's just less land, and all the things here. About which one is more, I guess, more exciting for the possibility of where you would want to go personally?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I feel like I have been exploring a lot and going into, let's say, smaller scale projects. So I'm very interested in continuing and using the findings from these projects, which I can definitely see as useful while starting these larger pilot projects.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in large projects as well. Definitely traveling to the US or Qatar or the Emirates or wherever the projects are.
Right, man. Yeah, no, that's I love that thought, because it's kind of like, it's kind of like this scaling thing, as we both know, as as people in the technical space. You have your theory, and then you do experiments, and then you do your papers and your reports on that, and then you do a mid scale or a small scale model, and just keep scaling it up. And then maybe the things that actually make it through that really robust and trying process, those things can actually be applicable to a large scale. If you do like 100 homes or 200 homes, something like that, like, hey, these things I found to be best practice and work well and are not overly finicky, or so very very hard to execute. So that growth is natural, it makes a lot of sense. And I can see the tremendous value that you could add to a team at a larger scale. Like, hey, what are the best things that you've seen and been literally done yourself? So that's tremendously valuable. So yeah, so wrapping, so as we kind of wrap the final chapter here, Adrian, what's the future look like? What for 2023 or 2024? What do you want to see, and where do you want to go?
Yeah, I'm very open to go to the US and really start to make some moves. And yeah, as you say, knowing all the necessary people for these projects, perhaps contacting those who has been involved so far to really kickstart the process, and to be part of a team like that, perhaps assembling a team like that, using the right machine, the right material, putting together the whole package, I think, and then starting with perhaps offsite printing, and then developing the team, learning, teaching, and just one house at a time. I think you got to start with one and have the vision of many.
Yes.
That would be very interesting, and to be part of this long-term strategy or long-term project. So I'm very open for that. At the same time, I'm still designing on my webpage, additive.dk.
Check it out, folks. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. It really is. And I'll drop, if it's on your LinkedIn profile, Adrian, I'll make sure to drop all that stuff in the LinkedIn. And of course, where this is also, I put this up on YouTube as well. Obviously, just two dudes just chatting here, but still, like, it's good to see. If you're on your computer, you can click through it and see the different cool things you have going on. So yeah, so we have audio and video of all of our podcasts. So anyway, I thought I'll put those links.
Yeah, cheers. I appreciate that. Thanks. But so for 23, I think I'm very open for these large projects, and I am in dialogue, with Ronaldo and people you know in the industry.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited for that. Also, I'm in dialogue with partners in Qatar and Emirates. So I'm sort of, there's only so much I can do with that. I'm just saying I'm ready, and then at the same time, I'm now probably I'm going to be a part of a group of people who are thinkers, and they get together in a room, and we find hopefully a partner and the vision and the idea, and then start to cooperate backed by investors. This is sort of a program I just was advised to go into. So
Yeah.
so that's also in the air. And yeah, I have some ideas for designs and smaller projects just to get started and keep the iron warm. If you can say that in English.
Oh, that works.
You
Yeah.
have to keep hands on.
Fire. The iron and fire,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
People know what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, those are exciting, man. Those are exciting. So, yeah. There's your website, of course. What is the best way that you like folks to reach out? So there's email, there's LinkedIn, it's on your website, is there a contact form? What's the best way for people that are really excited about what you're doing, this podcast, and maybe the things you've seen and the style the kind of architecture that you do? What's the best way for people to connect?
Recently, I've been using LinkedIn a lot. I think that's very valuable for anyone who's interested in being part of these movements, to be part
For
of
sure.
LinkedIn.
I totally
So
100% agree with that. Yeah.
yeah, so and you can do meetings, everything in there. So it's so LinkedIn is a good way. Otherwise, there's my mail, adrian@additive.dk, or there's my number. I don't know if I should say that here or.
Oh, we'll put it in the notes here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just save that for later. All right, man. So cool. So thank you for obviously participating and sharing your knowledge and your vision and the things you've done, and which makes it unique. And why people connect with you? Because of all these unique things you've done, and the vision and the passion and the opportunity that you are presenting and that you see in front of all of us. So that's all for now. Thank you for listening to this another episode of the House Now 3D podcast. Give us a like, give us a comment, spread the word, share it with your friends. And until next time, thank you, Adrian. Till later.
Yeah, thanks. See you.